Hey there, everybody. It's Rachel here from rachthestamper.wordpress.com, and today I'm going to show you how to make this really nice watercolor card. So if you saw from the YouTube post yesterday, I believe it was, I did some clear block stamping, and if you didn't have clear blocks, I showed you a way that you could watercolor onto the thick white cardstock. Well, today instead, I'm going to show you how to watercolor onto the watercolor paper. And I'm going to show you something else that I did completely by accident. So I watercolored this beautiful card, and then I stamped my sentiment, and it was crooked. So luckily, I hadn't attached this yet, so what I decided to do was make it like it was a pop-up photo card. So since I had a little crooked sentiment, I went a little crooked with my card, and look how cool that looks. Like I intended to do it. And no one would know unless I told them. So there you go. Anything that you make a little mess of, if that's what you think, you can always fix it. You just have to work around it. So for this card, what I used was the Serene Silhouettes stamp set, and I used the birds, and I stamped them in the Archival Black, and I just added a little bit of white just to give them a little bit of something, a little touch of something. And then I wrapped some linen thread around the bottom. I actually popped this up on dimensionals because the linen thread is a little bit thick. And then for the bottom, just for a little interest, I wanted to add something to it. I wanted to add like a button or something, but I couldn't find anything I really liked. So I just went with some of the basic pearls, and I just used the largest ones. I bumped it up onto a piece of Mint Macaron. And what I did with this, instead of sponging the edge, is I just dipped the edge in the ink pad, and I'll show you how to do that again on the next card I'm going to do. So this was Lost Lagoon, which is the dark around the edges, and then the inside I used the Mint Macaron. So for our next card, instead of using, we're going to still use this for our image stamp, but instead of using these words, we're from the stamp set Perfect Pairings. This was from Celebration, so this is no longer, but if you happen to have it, it has a lot of really good sayings. So what we're going to use instead is we're going to use a saying from the Celebration set, Botanicals for You, if you still have this and you're looking for something to do with it now that not as many people are talking about it since Celebration is over. So if you're lucky enough to have this set, we're going to use one of these. If not, you could certainly substitute in any other sets. Another really great set that has a lot of sayings is One Big Meaning. That's a lot of thank you sayings as well. So to get started on this card, we're going to use a piece of watercolor paper. This is cut at 3 1/4 by 3 3/4. And then what we're going to do is we're going to use an Aqua Painter. It has water in it already. And the two colors we're going to use are Island Indigo. And what you want to do is you open up your stamp pad, not fully open, and you squeeze it. It's going to sound like you're breaking it almost sometimes, but you're basically just want to squeeze that enough to create a little pool of ink there. And we'll do the same with Wisteria Wonder. Great. And then we're going to be using the Archival Black ink. I'm not going to open it yet because I'll probably stick my hand in it by accident. So what we're going to do, this you can do one of two ways. Sometimes what people do when they watercolor, they like to wash over the card with a little bit of water to help it dilute. For me, I think it makes it a little bit too liquidy, so I'm going to just fill up with the ink color that I choose and go over it. And the other thing you see, I do have my heat tool out here. This I just used to dry it off so I could stamp my image, because otherwise you do have to wait for that watercolor paper to dry a little bit. So what we're going to do first is we're going to start with our lighter color, which technically is the Wisteria Wonder. So we're going to just grab some ink, and we're just going to swirl it over, and you can control the flow by squeezing and adding a little more water here. I know I said that this was going to be the lighter color, and really it is. Once you see the Island Indigo come in, you'll understand. All right, and what you do want to do is you want to squeeze out your brush just to get the ink off. Now since we're going from lighter to darker, it's not quite as important, but and also since we're stamping on the lid, but if you were touching your pads directly, you don't want to contaminate your colors. And what I'm going to do is just go around the outside a little bit with this. Just going to squeeze in a little bit more water. And with watercoloring anything, especially if you're new to stamping or you're new to making things, you're probably going to be very critical of yourself when you first get started. Because I never really like what I do until I kind of look after them like, no, I think I do like that a lot more than I thought. So I just thought these two colors would be really pretty together because sometimes you can see these colors together in a sunset. And I'm going to just squeeze my water a little more just to dilute this out. And I think I'm going to go back and now, so here's where you want to rinse because you don't want to get your dark into your purple since it's going to be lighter. Just add a little bit more purple in here just to blend the edges slightly. Okay, so what I'm going to do, just for the sake of showing you what you want to do, is I'm going to just turn my heat gun on just for a second to dry this out. And as you notice, when you do dry it, it does get a little bit lighter. It still has a slight damp spot down here, so. Okay, and then what we're going to do now is we're going to come in with the Archival Black ink pad. And instead of doing the birds, this time I think I'm going to do the tree. So you just want to make sure you ink this up nicely. And the other thing I'm going to do, because my first birds didn't turn out quite as dark as I liked them, I'm going to bring the pad underneath the stamp one too. A lot of times I find it gives a nicer image. Okay, so maybe about there. I'm going to just push down and see what we get. Very pretty. Now, if you don't like this, if you don't think it colored in as well as you would like it to, you can get out your basic black marker, and I generally would use the fatter tip end, and you could always fill this in a little bit, make it a little blacker, a little darker, so it's more like you can't really see through it. I'm not going to really fill it in quite as much on this. I'll just go through the middle a little bit because honestly you can kind of see through the branches, and that's is what it is intended to be a little bit more when you're doing the watercolor paper. The paper is a little bit different, so when you get these more detailed images it doesn't necessarily fill in quite as well just because of the style of paper that this is. So we'll just bring it out just slightly, filling it in. As Bob Ross would say, with happy little trees. Remember watching him when I was younger. He's always an interesting guy to watch. Okay, so that's nice right there. I don't want to mess with it too much. So what I was telling you earlier, so this we're going to back up onto, I think I'm going to do it onto Wisteria Wonder because that is the lighter color out of these two. So I think it will look a little bit nicer. So we're going to go with a 4, let's see, that's 3 3/4. And let's see how this looks. So instead of 3 1/4 by 3 3/4, I did 3 3/8 by 3 7/8. So what we'll do is we're gonna put that. Oh, look at that! I'm being a pull lock tonight. Hold on a second. Measure that correctly. 3 3/4. No, like a pull lock. I did it by 3 3/4 square. Well, there you go. That explains everything. Okay. Back. So 3 3/4. We'll do this by. So we'll do 3 7/8 square. All right, let's try that again. Okay, so this is going to have a very thin border. And if you don't like that, I do like it when it has the very thin border. If you don't like it, you can either trim up your watercolor paper a little bit. You could make this paper your Wisteria Wonder just a shade bigger. What I'm going to do is just trim just a hair off of this so you can see just a little smidge more. I just shaved off 1/8, so that's not very much. So you'll be able to see a little bit. This would be more so if you had almost like a 1/4 inch border. So that's what it's going to look like. Now, to do what I was telling you earlier, instead of stamping or sponging, I should say, the edges, what you do is you just get your ink pad and you just dip, kind of press your edge in, and it gives you this nice line. I don't know if it is very easy to see on here or not, but it gives you a nice border line. And when you put it up against there, you will definitely be able to see it. But because we're going to put it on especially a whisper white base, you definitely will be able to see it. So instead of getting that fat sponged edge, you just get a nice straight line. I think it's pretty neat idea. All right, so what we're going to do is I'm going to put this onto a piece of cardstock. This is going to be 4 1/4 by 11, scored at 5 1/2. Let's go ahead and get out the bone folder. Okay, so you should be able to see that now. If you can see, that has that light, that really dark edge to it, which is really neat. So again, for this one, instead of doing, just because it's a darker color, the twine, I think I'm going to use, let's see what some of this stitched ribbon looks like. That should be pretty. We're going to use a little bit of stitched ribbon instead. So I'm going to just put a little bit of Fast Fuse onto the back. And move that down just a hair. Put one more line on here. There you go. That way it'll be below the tree mound. You just trim this off. All right. Okay. And I'm not going to put this on dimensionals because this one isn't really very high, unlike that, oops, last piece. If you've not used this Fast Fuse before, I will say it is a little bit difficult to get used to at first. Once you get the hang of it, it's not so bad, but you do have to do a checking motion to get it to release from the reel. So what I found is if you do that with everything, so if you do that also with your snail, you do the check, it'll get you in the habit better when you use this so you don't waste quite as much. And then what we're going to do again for this one, before we stamp, just in case we do a little goof, we're going to stamp our sentiment down and then we'll put down our image. So what I'm going to use is, I'm going to say, Because You're So Nice. See if we can fit that on there without making a royal mess. Let's see if I can get this one to go on here. Okay, so we're going to do this in, again, we'll do it in the basic black. You could certainly do it in the Wisteria Wonder if you wanted to keep with the same color scheme. So we'll see down here, Because You're So Nice. Hopefully wow, that was a miracle. So what we're going to do now is we're going to adhere our image on, since that is actually straight. Oops, see, there I did it again. So you just want to kind of pull it to the side, if that makes sense. Alright, and then we're going to put this image about midway. Alright, so there you go. So this is a really nice card you could use for happy birthday, thank you, because you're so nice, everyday card. You could also do the same thing if you want to add a couple pearls to it. Put a pearl right here on the bottom. And one more in. There you go. So we have one if you accidentally stamped sideways, or one if you stamped it in the correct direction. So those are just two examples of watercolor cards on watercolor paper. A lot of times, especially too with these silhouette cards, they really look great with the watercolor behind them, especially this one, just the way it washed out. It does look really, really pretty. You could also do this if you're doing it as a graded sunset card, so having, you know, the deeper color and then the orange and the pink as you go up through the sky. That would look really beautiful as well. So if you guys have any questions, feel free to shoot me a line, leave me a comment. You can reach me at rachthestamper.wordpress.com, rachthestamper@gmail.com. If you don't have a demonstrator, I'd love to be yours. Please find me at rachthestamper.stampinup.net. Hope to hear from you guys soon, and I hope you have a great day. Thanks for watching.